Welcome to another episode of the Awakening and Conscious Living podcast. I'm Louisa, and this is
Bill.
Bill. And today we're going to do another round of talking about sun questions, spirituality based. Specifically, we're going to talk about some Hindu based questions. And this is more of a Louisa gets to benefit in this conversation. I'm going to be learning something new. I'm going to be asking Bill some questions. About the topic. And part of this, for me, from my perspective, is, conscious living is awareness. Is once you have awareness, then you kind of get to decide what to do with it. You get to decide, you know, whether it is something that feels true for you, whether it is something that does not align with your truth, not my truth, not Bill's truth, but your truth. And therefore, I love having these conversations and learning, and hoping that you, the viewer, gets to take something away from this too. I'll tell you this, Bill. So my introduction to, we actually just finished recording the last episode, but this sort of comes in kind of following along those lines. My introduction to Hinduism comes from when I had my biggest spiritual awakening. When I started meditating without any concept of knowing what Hinduism was. I didn't know anything about Buddhism. I'd always been attracted to the Buddhist statutes, but I didn't understand why. It was just beautiful to me and always just pulled me, but I didn't know anything about it. After I started meditating a little bit and reading some spiritual stuff, not a lot, and I'll get to that in a second. Um, I started to come across Hinduism. The first thing was the Vedas. That was the first thing that I like learned about, and it really aligned with me. I really felt like, oh my God, there's so much there. There's so much that I still feel like I didn't even touch the surface of understanding the depths of that. But in spirituality, what I found was what I was looking for, I guess, was understanding why meditation had the effect that it had on me in my life, at that point in my life. And I really understood that I wanted to be a monk. And that, before that, I'll bring you back even before that. Before I was a 19-year-old mom, I really wanted to, something I never shared out loud because in my culture that was like crazy, but I wanted to be a nun. um, yeah, and I didn't know where that came from either because that was the complete opposite of what I was being sort of um taught to be as a woman. I was supposed to be promiscuous and all those things versus yeah, and that's kind of weird too. That has like its whole own weird thing that is a whole other like podcast in itself. But um being like thinking and having the desire to be a nun, that was odd. That was extremely odd from where I was and how I was being raised and the people that I was around. And so when I got to this point of like I'm meditating and I really love being in silence and I really love being by myself, it was really like I want to understand why this feels the way that it feels. And that's what brought me into like looking into, and stumbling upon the Vedas and Hinduism and all of that. Now, it is still, I would not mind if everything in my life disappeared and I was a monk. I think I've been very open about that. Like I think I would really enjoy just being a monk at this point. And that for me has a lot to do with I think I seek being in, my in not being in this body, I think is the simplest way to put it. Not being in this human experience. I'm very over it. I can see I have this book. Wait, I have to find it to show you. I don't know if I've talked to you about this before. The complete works of Florence Scovel. I can't say Scovel. Shin.
Shin.
Yes. So it's within this. Oh, you can see it right here. The Game of Life and How to Play It. So that was the first book that I got. Then I got this one, which is all of Florence's work. And this was again kind of like Hinduism, one of those first things that after my awakening I stumbled upon. And I understood, this is a game. Like we're here, this is a game. You can kind of think about it that way. There are many different ways, and I do think about it in many different ways. But Hinduism was sort of that next step for me after I was like, okay, this is a game, this is how you play it. For me, this specifically, the Game of Life and How to Play It, that book specifically, what it taught me was very high level, like you have the ability to control your emotions. Like your emotions are what's leading your life. And like you decide whether you're gonna let them run you or whether you're gonna run them in a way. You know what I mean? So, but then a step further, Hinduism sort of taught me like, oh, there's so much history to this. Like, you're not the only one who's gone through this. There is so much about all of this that kind of, here's some of it. So that's a long way of saying today, one of the questions that we had was about Brahma, the creator, Shiva, the destroyer, and Vishnu, the protector. And I told you I've heard of these things, like I've seen those words. I understand Hinduism very high level. I read a little bit into the Vedas, just sort of doing some research for my old podcast that I used to be a part of. But tell me about that. What is Brahma the creator? Where does this all fit into Hinduism? What does it mean to you? Is this a religion? Where is it practiced?
That's probably more questions than I know the answer to. I've just I've locked into the concept of so Hinduism's obviously religion. I do not know whether Brahma, Vishnu, and I don't know if it's Shiva or Shiva.
Shiva.
Um, is it Shiva?
Oh, no, I have no idea.
So
What's going
somebody please tell us. Put it in the comments. I don't know if they're gods, and I could explain my definition of gods maybe in a second. But they're let's call them gods for right now. They're gods in the Hindu religion. Okay, and but they each have a particular uh, overall purpose. Okay, Brahma is the god of creation. Brahma creates. Okay, uh, Vishnu maintains. Okay, and Shiva destroys.
on?
And if you really think about life, I mean, everything we're experiencing is creation, maintenance, and destruction. Okay.
Mm.
I mean, we're born, right? That's creation. And then we're creating all these things in the world. And then we're maintaining them. We're creating a family, maintaining a family. Okay. And in the end, Shiva, we die. And the concept of family dies also. It's the concept of like, let's just say that, let's say the natural maturation of a family. You get married. That's creation, right? You create kids. You create this family. Everybody's living in the same house. We're all going to the grocery store, the movies, and all this stuff together, right? It's the maintenance of our lives. But then what happens? There's death because the kids leave the family and they go out and start their own family, okay? And the process starts again. And you can look at it in the seasons, right? You've got spring, it's creation. Summer is growth, it's maintenance, okay? And then uh, fall and winter leads to death. And then you do it over again. You've got day and night. You've got morning. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to create. As I go through the day, I maintain my body, my life, my all this type of stuff. And then tonight, I go to sleep. That's death. The,
Mm.
this today's day is, or yesterday's day is done. It's and now we go to sleep. We can talk about sleeping and dreaming at some point in time if we want to, and then we start the cycle over. If you look at businesses, okay, businesses, there's a genesis, there's a growth, and then over time, as society changes, I mean, we don't have people making buggy whips or horse whips anymore, right? There are not very many of them because not everybody's running around on horses, but we do have a tire industry to keep tires on our cars, okay? And so all of these things, I mean, when I was growing up, there was not really anything such as fast food.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
There's a whole new industry that has grown, and uh, and hopefully at some levels dying. But that is our whole life. You can look at all of life as creation, maintenance, destruction. You can look at a marriage. I mean, look at the divorce rates over 50%, right? At least in the Western world. Creation, maintenance, destruction. Why is there destruction? Destruction happens when things need to be rebuilt because what was not working needs to be destroyed so something that will work can be destroyed. And even inside of a marriage, let's say you're married to the same person for your whole life, there's still little mini cycles
Hmm.
of creation, maintenance, destruction. And so it's a beautiful way because, and this is why I say it's a beautiful way, because we get attached to things. We go, oh, I love it when we were first married. It was just so romantic. And we get attached to that concept. Or we get attached to the concept of, I don't know, having our kids in the house. Or we get attached to how successful we were in the middle of our career. And we don't want to let go of those things. Okay. But it's only in the continuous letting go, in the destruction, that we get to recreate again. And so that to me, um, now whether the Hindus explained it exactly like that, I don't know. Okay. But that's my understanding. And we've got, I think I sent you this last night because you asked a question, and this won't probably show up too well either. But, I had a spiritual t shirt company, which is currently in limbo or on ice, but I'm going to bring it back. But this is one of the symbols for one of our t-shirts. I've got a t-shirt like this in my closet, but it's Brahma the creator, Vishnu the protector, and whoops, and Shiva the destroyer. And in the middle is life. But see how the three circles
Yeah.
overlap? So, and there's also beautiful, what's the word? Not physics. I don't know where lines intersect. Uh,
Yeah, I have no idea.
geometric patterns.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yes, yes, yes.
there's
I agree
beautiful
on that.
geometric patterns in the concept of, creation, protection, and destruction.
Do you feel like, right, like there are certain parts of the earth, talking about like the earth itself, where one is more prominent than the other? Like right now, do you feel like, Shiva the destroyer energy is more in play, or do you feel like they're just always cycling in every aspect, like cycle, cycle, cycle?
Are you talking about the physical world? You're talking about the
The
social
physical world.
world?
The
Social
physical.
world?
The
Um,
physical world. I mean, I guess the physical and the social world. I
yeah.
kind of
Well, I
feel like
think
it's
that,
both.
yeah. So one thing I will tell you that Earth, Mother Gaia, is a living creature.
Mm.
Okay. And it obviously reacts to how we interact with it, right? Um, I mean, the symbiotic relationship, if you think about it, is just absolutely incredible. Think about water as a living being or a conscious energy, um, that we just completely take for granted. Uh, so yes, I do believe actually that the Earth is being a little bit more reactive lately because
Mm.
I believe that we've populated this world too much. And I think that we've done it in a very destructive way through a lot of pollution and a lot of ego. And I think the earth is reacting to that. We're having a lot, just recently in the last 6 months, having a lot more earthquakes, and we're having flooding, and weather patterns are getting a little more violent, and there's a lot of things going on. But so that's happening. But I also believe that there is a social shift. I mean, we got into this Western world, into the industrial age, and everybody else is in it too now, right? It's not just the Western world. Um, and, we just started to try to live a luxurious life and put our focus in the wrong place. And a lot of people in the what we call the one percenters or whatever, that have hoarded and used capitalism. It's capitalism misused is no different than a king and a feudal system,
Yeah.
right? And so that has been misused. But I believe that there's a groundswell, and I believe it actually a lot of it has started in the spiritual community, and with the help of the internet, has spread. Um, but I believe that there's a core faction of well-meaning souls, souls that are learning how to love themselves and love the world, that are scattered in all different careers and cultures and places in the world, that are bringing about a transformation. And I also, and we get back to, we talked about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King in our last podcast. I get back to that. I mean, destruction has to happen sometimes. And Malcolm X was about destruction. Uh, Martin Luther King was about destruction, but in a non-violent way. But you see that the Earth can be pretty violent, and people have been, societies have been very violent. And I'm not for violence, but you know, the United States itself was started by basically a bunch of robbers and thieves and people that didn't want to uh, participate in the English form of government. So we were rebels. It was the rebels that came over to the United States. So we had to rebel. We had to create destruction to bring about creation. Um, and I think that that's going on across the world right now because we've realized that some of the things that we've aligned ourselves to are ego driven and of the world and not of spirit.
Mm, yeah, that's a beautiful answer. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Do you, so you mentioned, and I wrote this down when we were talking about, when we were talking in our last episode, but you mentioned I'm going to call it overpopulation of the earth. I often think about how much that has to do with spirituality. I'm like, was that something that intentionally more souls coming into this realm is intended to sort of help the social shift that's occurring where there are souls within every culture, family, etc. I think a lot about like the black sheep in the family. That seems to be like a popular thing, that where it seems like at least somebody's waking up and sort of realizing the truth. I'll leave it at that. But that overpopulation, do you feel like that was ego driven, or do you think there's like a greater purpose for that overpopulation that's occurring in this realm at this time?
Um, I'm going to jump back to what you touched on for just a second, and that is there are a lot, I'm going to say, of us that are breaking generational bad habits and traumas and healing traumas because the way that we've our that our families have progressed in some areas have been unhealthy. Like, if you go back to corporal punishment and, you tell your child not to play with fire, and then you find out they were, in the back of the house playing with matches, then you bring them in and beat them, you know? I mean, that is obviously not the most intelligent way to handle an issue like that. First off, you don't tell them not to play with fire. You teach them how to play with fire, how to use fire as a tool. Um, and then if they abuse that, then they will find the consequences out themselves. They'll get hurt or something will happen, right? So uh, and if you look at Edgar Casey, the Sleeping Prophet, he would say that there were certain years that certain souls came to Earth to begin this transformation process. Um, so we have that, but the the last question you asked me was, 8 billion. I think is it 8 billion people?
It's almost 9 now, I think.
Almost 8, 9 billion people, 10 billion people on this earth. Was that intentional? I don't know. Um, maybe we just are like rabbits. We like to populate. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I feel
Good answer
unsure.
for that.
No, I'm unsure because I ask a lot, is it an ego thing? Is it because we built, especially in the Western world, these ideas of, that white picket fence with the 2.5 kids sort of thing? Like, is that what drove it? Was it ego driven, from that perspective? Or was it like, oh, let's try to flip the script in this realm that has basically gone to hell, for lack of better terms, but that has become so disconnected from God and send in souls that are connected so that then they can affect the population and affect the change that needs to happen. But I feel unsure about that. I feel unclear about which one it is. I don't know. I've asked, looked around, but I haven't sat down to like meditate to see what feels true for me. But generally speaking, I just don't know which of the true of it could be that both are true, right? That there's maybe, a combination of both that
I mean,
brought
there
us.
are some belief systems that we grew up with in our families that we just assumed was the way, right?
Yeah.
Like you get married, you have kids,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, why the fuck? I've been questioning that a lot. Why the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, but not everybody does that. But if somebody's like, I've got a female friend of mine, and in the workplace, I mean, she's been single her whole life, and she doesn't have any kids. And in the workplace, the other females, most of them were married, had kids, and they were like prejudiced against her. I mean, because they're like, why aren't you married? Why don't you have kids? Or, well, you can bring the brownies on Friday for the birthday party because you don't have kids, stuff like that. And so there is stigma about women who don't marry, right? Uh, the stigma about, you know, men who don't have kids. I mean, there's all type of stigmas and beliefs out there, beliefs that we're supposed to get married and have kids and populate the world, and that's the way things work. That we just don't even question.
Look at how that's worked out for us. That's all I'll say.
Obviously, lots of things that without awareness and without questioning don't necessarily work out very good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this kind of hits because I've been questioning a lot of that. There was a part of me when I was very young, along the lines of kind of in that same time period where I was like, I want to be a nun sort of thing, where it was like, I don't want to have kids. Like, I don't want to be a mother. And I like knew that deeply, like very deeply was clear to me, which again was against everything that I had grown up with. My dad was one of 13, one of 14, but one of the children died. Um, and then all of his siblings, and I'm talking about all 13 of them, had three plus children, except for one of them. My aunt only had two kids. And everybody else had three plus up to six, eight children. So, that idea of I don't want to have kids, like that was fucking radical. Like if I had said that out loud and if I'd followed that, especially like right now in these days where I'm just like, what would have my life have fucking been like had I not had kids? Like who would I be today? Um, when you mentioned your friend who was always single and never, married, had kids, like that sounds fucking good to me, right? Like that sounds fucking amazing. Oh my God, what a dream. But, it is with awareness. And because I am here and because I had kids and because I got married and because I had that experience, but I do think that it is that awareness. And it is the reason why we do this podcast, bringing those questions to the forefront of your mind. The last thing that I want for my own kids, which of course they're going to do whatever the hell they want, and that's what I hope they do. But what I want for them is to come into these things and to like end up being a parent without having thought about it, without having considered what their lives may look like, what that means for the sacrifices they may have to make, what that means for their financial well-being, what that means for, their mental, emotional. That is the last thing that I want for my children, for most people. And so awareness is the first step. Being aware, answering these questions for yourself before you even get to have the conversation with somebody else to make sure that you're not persuaded by their ideals or, their religion or their wants and needs. You need to have your own. You need to know where you stand first. And then if you are persuaded because that's what feels good and true to you because you realize that what they're sharing is what they want, is what you also want, then cool. But you need to answer these questions for yourself. You need to know what you would like, what is true for you, what feels good for you, what is from your heart versus what the external world is telling you.
That's right. be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Ask questions, decide what, because every single soul that comes into this world has got a particular set of gifts and a particular beauty. And if you just fall into the norms of society, then some of those gifts get overlooked. And we need to question, we need to question everything, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it was very natural. Your family thought, you know, your dad, big family, 12, 13 brothers and sisters, you know, and what do? You get married, you have more kids. That's what you were taught. That's what was, I'm not saying my parents said, oh, you need to get married and have kids, but that was what was completely modeled around
Hmm.
me, you know. I've got a son who's a monk. So, and, you know, I love that. I love that. I think that everybody needs to have what I call fertile ground space where they're allowed to make their own decisions, choose their own life, and for parents not to assume that they're going to be one thing or another. Why would you, yeah, when a child is young, why would you go, oh, I sure hope they're a policeman or an astronaut or a doctor or a lawyer? Let them help nurture their gifts so they can figure out how to bring the most amount of beauty and love into the world for themselves. And if you're doing it for yourself, then that will overflow to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. That is very true. I see that a lot with my daughter.
Your eyes got bigger then.
Yeah.
Daughter.
Yeah, my daughter. Where she's, she is who she is. And whether I like it or not is not of her concern. And I love that for her. Like I mean, I don't love that for me parenting her right now, but I freaking love that. I hope she continues to grow up and walk among the world that way and not give a goddamn about what anybody else feels about what she wants. I really hope so. Um, yeah.
And see, I'm going to interrupt you. Thank you. Um, some children, young adults, whatever, some souls are more passive. Some souls are more fiery. Okay. We need both. And then there's souls all the way in between. But the fiery child, because they're naturally fiery, and probably more easily break patterns. Okay.
Yeah.
The child that is not as fiery tends to conform. Like
Yeah.
even in a classroom, I read a study about, you know, teachers teaching and then ask a question. And certain people are like, they raise their hand, oh, call on me, I got answers. And, but the people that did raise their hand had just as good, sometimes better questions and better answers. But because they're not as outgoing, the class doesn't get that equal contribution from everybody. Um, and so we have to create environments that allow for people to be themselves without having to break through barriers. Just helping them select, fertilize, get sunlight, just a environment that's conducive to growth choice with some boundaries so that they don't hurt.
Yeah. I love that. I'll just wrap it up with this, but when you said that about the classroom, it made me think of, and it sounds like I'm obsessed with this, but of my daughter being in private school versus her experience in public school. And that I didn't have, like, I couldn't say it. I didn't know how to say it until you just said it. But that right there, the kids who had as good as answer in her private school, there was no raising hands. When the teacher asked a question, everybody wasn't like whoever raised their hands first. Nobody raised their hands. You just had to know the answers, the expectation for when the teacher would call on you. So you didn't know if you were going to be called on or not. And I see that in my daughter, where, her level of curiosity is like no kid I've ever seen before. And even when my son was little, she's so curious. And the thing about her curiosity is that she doesn't need instruction to go find the answer. Like, this is not a kid that I have to go tell, oh, you're curious about this? Go, find a book. This is a kid who's curious. I have no idea. She goes, reads a 900 book page on it, and next week she knows all about it, and she comes and tells me the whole thing that she just experienced from this one curious thought that she just had while she was laying in bed, at whatever time. And it's so different than my son, who has excelled academically. He graduated with a 4.63 GPA. Okay, like, my son has excelled and he went all public school. So it's interesting, though, the difference, because my son, he does need a little more direction. I At least once a week, we're sitting down making lists and giving him, okay, this is your path, and he will follow that path to the T. He will do all of the things every day, and he will excel at all of them. But that sit down for that direction is necessary. Where my daughter, I think that private school training where, not only was the teacher at the head, it was so ingrained in all of these children that she wasn't always right. She challenged them to challenge her. And I love that. I see it in my daughter. It's almost like that is so much of what defined who she is, that she's kind of ran with it, and it's become part of who she is, and that she doesn't wait for the answer to come. She goes to get it. And she also understands that, she has to be prepared in case she's in a situation where that information is valuable. And it proves to be a lot of time. Like, we'll be, I don't know, out in nature having a walk or something, and she sees some tree and there's this little speck of white thing on it or something, and she'll be like, this is da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. She's read a 900 page book about it, and I had no freaking idea. Now she knows. And I just feel like the level of preparation for life in general is like beyond anything that I could have ever given her without having had that experience that she's had in that private school system, which has nothing to do with anything, but that's what came to mind when you said that. Um,
All have different learning styles. All have different personalities. We all go into the world with different perceptions, and we learn different ways.
yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so this topic was about, so we can wrap it up. I forget what it was about.
It's about Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva.
Okay, so we'll wrap it up. I think we should wrap it up. So as it pertains to that, we just started talking about like Hinduism. We started talking about Brahma, the creator, Shiva, the destroyer, and Vishnu, the protector. What are your closing thoughts on that? Sort of tying it all together.
My closing thoughts are using that model to look at things in the world helps us not live in the past, helps us live in the present, release what's not serving us, and go create something new, and understanding where we are in that cycle, whether it's where we are in the cycle of our marriage, whether it's where we are in the cycle of our job, whether it's where we are in the cycle of our spiritual walk, any of those things. But in this world, because we fear death, we desperately grasp to hang on to patterns that are no longer serving us. Whatever that pattern is, not that, you have to get divorced, or that, you have to die, or you have to change jobs, but look at the pattern of where you are, and make sure that you're not staying in maintenance pattern too long because you're scared of destruction.
Mm,
That's
yeah,
the message.
I love that. Thank you. And I would just add to that, sort of emphasize what you said. It's a cycle. It's a
Yes.
cycle.
And
It's
we're
all a cycle.
creators. We're
Yeah,
creators by nature. But everything that gets created gets destructed too.
yeah. That's part of the journey.
Part of the journey. Okay, well, thank all our followers. Thank you for listening. Put questions and comments, and we'll be podcasting next week.
Right? Until next time. Thank you.
Thank you all. Namaste.
Namaste.
If you're waking up, questioning everything, and trying to reconnect with who you truly are, I wrote this book for you. It's a guide to remembering your divine nature, healing old conditioning, and stepping into inner sovereignty. If that resonates, check out the link below, www.atobook.com.